Hello from Jonathan and me. Welcome to the programme.
First tonight, a local MP's embarrassment over an email sent in error.
Elizabeth Truss is the Tory MP for South West Norfolk and was the intended recipient of an email from her secretary about a constituent.
Unfortunately for her, the message was mistakenly sent to the very man in question. What made it worse was the suggestion that he might be unhinged.
Mrs Truss has apologised, describing the comments as completely unacceptable. Malcolm Robertson's report contains some flash photography.
When he lost his job at a Norfolk care home last year, Thomas Ryan turned to his local MP for help. First of all to Christopher Fraser, then Member of Parliament for South West Norfolk, then to Elizabeth Truss, who succeeded Mr Fraser by retaining the seat for the Conservatives at the general election. He wasn't satisfied with their responses, although both MPs say he was asked to submit a signed report to them, which he failed to do. Instead, he sent several emails as well as phoning the local Tory office, seeking an appointment with Mrs Truss at one of her surgeries at the Waitrose supermarket in Swaffham. Mr Ryan was shocked by last week's reply, one of which has left red faces at the local Conservative office. A private email sent by Elizabeth Truss's secretary and intended for the MP was instead mistakenly sent to Thomas Ryan. Elizabeth, this is the chap who keeps going on about the care home. I think I should call him beforehand just to see what he's like on the phone. If he is unhinged, you really don't want him kicking off in Waitrose, Swaffham. It was signed Fee.
I think it's incredibly unprofessional. I was very shocked. Not something I would have expected.
The next day, an angry Mr Ryan emailed his response. I am not unhinged. I do not intend on kicking off or anything else. I want help. Shortly afterwards, Elizabeth Truss herself emailed him and followed up with a phone call. In the email she said, "This is the first time I've seen these comments and I agree that they are completely unacceptable. I completely apologise for the offence that they must have caused you."
I think it's an incredible assumption for the Secretary to make, given that they hadn't spoken to me or seen me in person and really didn't know that much about me at all.
All of which must be rather embarrassing for Elizabeth Truss, who's had an eventful first year in Norfolk politics, surviving attempts to deselect her as the local Conservative candidate following revelations about her private life. This isn't the first time an email has fallen into the wrong hands, and it won't be the last. Elizabeth Truss has declined our request for an interview on camera, but she told me that her secretary had been severely reprimanded and had been left in no doubt that this was a serious error. I asked whether it was a sacking offence, but she said no. More experienced politicians have discovered the pitfalls of careless talk. Stephen Byers resigned as Transport Secretary after his spin doctor sent an email suggesting bad news be buried on the day of the 9/11 explosions. And Gordon Brown regretted the open microphone that picked up his indiscreet comments about what he claimed was a bigoted woman he met during the general election campaign. In Swaffham, where Elizabeth Truss was selected as the Tory candidate, local people gave their reaction to the email sent from Conservative office.
It's disrespectful, isn't it? And they wouldn't have your medical records, would they? So it's wrong.
Would I feel insulted? Probably not.
You'd be offended if you got that email, would you?
Definitely, yes. I wonder how even the MP would feel that it had happened.
In addition to his apology, Thomas Ryan has got an appointment with Elizabeth Truss next month. One suspects they might have quite a lot to talk about. Malcolm Robertson, Anglia News, Norfolk.
Well, let's join Malcolm Robertson, who's live in Swaffham for us tonight. Malcolm, she's employed some pretty hefty damage limitation, hasn't she? But what do you think? Is this going to be really damaging for Liz Truss's political career, do you think?
I think, Jonathan, this needs to be kept in perspective. Is it embarrassing? Of course it is. Will there be adverse publicity? Yes. But will there be any long-term damage? I don't think so. This was an email not sent by her. It was sent by her secretary. She was very quick to apologise to Mr Ryan. And, of course, she was very quick to carpet her secretary and make it clear that this was a serious error. But in terms of fallout for her political career, I don't really think so, no.
Malcolm, the Prime Minister's usually been quite quick to jump on things like this. What's been the reaction by the Conservative Party today?
Well, I spoke to Conservative Central Office and they're fairly keen to distance themselves from this. They make the point that Elizabeth Truss's secretary is employed by her and not the Conservative Party, and they're quite happy that she resolves it as she sees fit. Now, I imagine that Fiona Walker in future will be very keen and very careful about who she sends emails to. But, of course, this could be any one of us, and I think it's a very salutary lesson not to commit to print very private thoughts.
Indeed, Malcolm Robertson, thanks very much. Next tonight, more than 600 jobs are going in Peterborough after the Royal Bank of Scotland announced it will close its Churchill insurance office within 3 years.
The part-nationalised bank told its staff this afternoon that 14 of their 27 insurance offices across the country will shut, including ones in Peterborough and Ipswich. Well, Kate Prout joins us now from our newsroom with the very latest. Kate.
Well, this is another blow for a city that is already living under the shadow of hundreds of job losses. In the last few years, travel agent Thomas Cook, the Land Registry, Freeman's Magazine, Perkins Engines and Peterborough City Council have all either shed jobs or threatened major staff cutbacks. Now, all 666 staff at Churchill Insurance in Thorpewood in Peterborough were told this afternoon that its owner, RBS, could start making job losses as soon as later this year. Also affected is the Crown Street office in Ipswich, which employs 200 people, although the Princes Street branch will stay. Now, the Royal Bank of Scotland bought Churchill Insurance back in 2003. RBS announced back in May this year that it was shedding 2,000 jobs after being told by the European Commission to sell its insurance business by 2013, following their government bailout. We spoke to RBS earlier today, who said it would hope to redeploy as many staff as possible to other centres across the country that won't be affected. But if the bank sells its insurance operations, well, that could lead to even more job losses in the future.
All right, Kate, thank you for that. A former headmaster accused of sexually assaulting boys in schools in Norfolk and Suffolk has today admitted there was a sexual motive behind his corporal punishment.
61-year-old Derrick Slade from Staffordshire admits 19 counts of indecent assault and assault, but denies 9 sexual offences and 6 assaults. Today, he took to the witness box for the first time. Laura Burns was in court.
As a young head teacher, Derrick Slade defiantly championed corporal punishment. But now, nearly 30 years on, he admits he went too far. St George's School was a boarding school for boys with parents in the armed forces. In 1980, it moved from Wicklewood in Norfolk to this site at Great Finborough in Suffolk. Earlier in the trial, the prosecution said beating with canes, bats and slippers were common. And according to several former pupils, sexual abuse often followed. Well, today in front of the jury, Derrick Slade not only admitted that some of his punishments were excessive, he also admitted there was an underlying sexual motive to them. He says that at the time he was in denial about this motive, but now, especially after hearing from some of the witnesses, he's aware of the lasting psychological harm he may have caused some of his former pupils. The court heard how he made the boys write essays about their beatings, entitled Whackings I Have Had. But while he admits his conduct was sometimes indecent, Slade strongly denies all charges of serious sexual assault. He describes as pure nonsense the idea that letters and phone calls home were monitored, and says boys were only ever in the grounds of his house for fizzy drinks and biscuits after swimming sessions. The defence is also querying the particular allegations of 2 boys, who, according to the school's admission book, were not in the school at that time. They say the book has been falsified. The trial continues. Laura Burns, Anglia News, Ipswich.